Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Ivory Coast's President Assane Ouattara has urged voters to support him for peace and stability ahead of elections. The vote comes amid tensions with several rivals barred from running ahead of growing calls for new leadership. US President Donald Trump has dismissed efforts by Israeli lawmakers to advance legislation annexing the occupied West Bank, saying Israel is not going to do anything there. The bill, which would apply Israeli law to the territory claimed by Palestinians for a future state, won initial approval in the Knesset on Wednesday. Marco Rubio has warned that Israel's move towards annexing the West Bank could undermine President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Speaking before departing for Israel, Rubio said the president had made it clear that such annexation is not something that we'd be supportive of right now, calling the Knesset vote potentially counterproductive. US President Donald Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea on October the 30th on the sidelines of the APEC summit, the White House has confirmed. It will be the first face-to-face between the two leaders since Trump's return to office as trade tensions rise over Washington's threat of 100% tariffs and Beijing's restrictions on rare earth exports. The United Nations has called on Israel to allow more aid trucks through additional crossings into Gaza, saying current levels fall short of the ceasefire terms. Palestinians continue to face severe shortages of food and clean water, with many unable to return home amid an ongoing Israeli military presence. Lebanon's health ministry says 4 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in the country's east and south. The IDF confirmed hitting targets linked to Hezbollah, saying the group had used the areas to plan attacks against Israel. Argentine President Javier Milei urged supporters at a Rosario rally ahead of Sunday's midterms. Milei seeks to sustain his austerity policies, economic reforms and labour and tax plans amid pressure from the US and slipping approval ratings. US President Donald Trump has announced an immediate end to all trade negotiations with Canada, accusing Ottawa of egregious behaviour over a political ad featuring Ronald Reagan criticising tariffs. Trump has also imposed a 35% levy on Canadian imports, with exemptions for goods covered under the USMCA trade deal. Now we start in the African continent, where Ivory Coast's long-time president, Assane Ouattara, has told supporters that a vote for him is a one for stability, development and solidarity. Ouattara has made these remarks during his final rally ahead of an election in which several of his opponents were barred from running. Let's take a listen in to what Ouattara has said.
Puis le samedi 25 octobre, votez massivement, car vous voterez pour la paix, pour la stabilité, pour le développement et pour la solidarité. Votez à dos pour la paix. Je vous demande d'être vigilant, de bien surveiller vos différents quartiers. Parce que vous savez, les chiens peuvent toujours passer, hein? Mais nous devons être prêts à protéger la Côte d'Ivoire. Cette élection n'est pas une simple compétition politique. Nous avons redressé la Côte d'Ivoire. Le pays connaît une croissance extraordinaire depuis 2011 et elle doit continuer Elle doit continuer, en tout cas pour les 5 prochaines années.
This election pits Ouattara against 2 former government ministers, as well as the ex-wife of his predecessor, Laurent Gbagbo. Ouattara is the only candidate with the backing of a strong political party, making him the clear favourite. Ouattara came to power after a 4-month civil war that drew on ethnic tensions and was spurred by Gbagbo's refusal to acknowledge defeat in the 2010 election. Meanwhile, the presidential election has deepened divisions between those supporting Ouattara's bid to extend his rule and others calling for new leadership. Let's listen in to what some of the residents of the Ivory Coast had to say.
Alassane, vraiment, pourquoi le meilleur candidat, bon, depuis, quand même, nous on a vécu quand même, voilà, de 2010, 2011, 2012, et puis quand on regarde l'évolution du pays, en ce moment-là, vraiment, je pense qu'il a quand même fait la moitié, il reste encore beaucoup à faire, voilà, surtout, bon, moi je souhaite la paix entre les Ivoiriens.
Les épouses, nous les mamans, nous avons peur, nous sommes stressés. La tension qu'il y a entre les différents candidats dans le pays, entre la population, tout ça, c'est stressant. Parce que quand il y a problème, c'est les épouses, c'est les époux, c'est les enfants. Donc, à tous les coups, les femmes sont prises dans un piège. Et nous ne voulons pas de cela. Nous voulons un président qui vient pour réconcilier les Ivoiriens, qui ôte la peur dans le cœur, la méfiance et tout ça dans le cœur des Ivoiriens.
We're now joined by our guest, Anayuga Olongbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst and he joins us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us, Ayanuga, here on NewsX World. It is a pleasure to have you. What more can you tell us about this election, and what are the stakes for the people of the Ivory Coast going into it?
Well, the stakes are high in the area of security, and that is why the president had to deploy about 40,000 security forces to stave off all fears, because there are protests here and there, especially led by Laurent Gbagbo, the former president, and also by supporters of Tijani Thiam, who is a Credit Suisse director and also contesting in this election. But the challenge is that because the 2 major oppositions, Laurent Gbagbo and Tijani Thiam, have been disqualified. Tijani Thiam is disqualified because he holds dual citizenship, French and Ivory Coast citizenship, as at the time he registered for his interest to contest for presidency. Meanwhile, let's not forget that back in 1995, it was this same law that disqualified the current president, Alassane Ouattara, when he showed interest back then to contest for president. And also, I think in year 2000, he was disqualified because his parent, or I think his mother, was from Burkina Faso, and you know his hometown shares is not far from the border with Burkina Faso, and so there is a lot of ties between people, migrants from Burkina Faso and Mali into that part of the country. In fact, the 2002 civil war that was experienced during the time of Laurent Gbagbo as president was occasioned by these complaints that borders on genocide of the people from migrants from Mali who traditionally have ties with people of northern Ivory Coast. Now, but the challenge is that now this law is affecting a powerful candidate in person of Tijani Thiam, and because the president has already suffered such ill luck before, so he has every excuse, every right to say, see, the law applied to me, I abided by the law. So you can't say the law should not apply to another person, maybe because you like that person. Also, for Laurent Gbagbo, because of his conviction, after he refused to give power when he lost the election in 2010, and he stayed put in office in 2011 and refused to until he was forced out. And you know, the civil war that briefly followed that situation then led to the death of more than 3,000 Ivory Coast, Ivorians. And he was convicted, and that conviction made him ineligible to contest. And many of the other smaller opposition parties candidates, because they are
Yes.
not having the back or support of the bigger opposition party. So it's like a waste of time. And also the fact that they are not even be able to form coalition among themselves and present one common front is also giving this incumbent president Alassane Ouattara a free ride, coupled with the economic policies and growth that the country has experienced during his time. You know, he said in one of his last interview, his last rallies yesterday, that he is the only face or hope for continuity for the youth to make the Ivory Coast economy become a middle income economy by 2030 and help the youth to find their feet, get independent, and become economically more responsible. So all these things are working for him, except the fear for disruption or a no-show where there will be voter apathy and there will be very little
Yes.
turnout. I think he is on the beat to win this election and win it for good. Maybe
Yes.
by the next election, when he will
Yes.
be 88, it won't go the way
Aya
of
Nuga,
Biya.
thank you very much. Do stay with us. We have further news coming out of Africa next, where M23 rebels have denied accusations of a gold theft at a mine in eastern Congo, rejecting claims from the mining company Gaza. Cornel Nangia, the leader of a rebel alliance that includes M23, stated that the mine was not operational and only artisanal miners were working there. He also emphasized that M23 lacked the necessary equipment to run the mine. The mine, seized by the rebels in May, has reported losses of over 100 kilograms of gold per month and $5 million in equipment. The company has declared the force majeure and plans to file formal complaints with international and Congolese authorities. Nangaa has accused Congolese government forces of bombing the site, causing civilian casualties, though he did not provide details. M23 has faced repeated accusations from the UN and governments about its involvement in illegal mineral exploitation, particularly in the coltan-rich Rabuya region. We are now once again joined by Aya Nuga. What more can you tell us about the current state, the operations of the M23 rebels, Aya Nuga?
Well, it seems the M23 rebels have firm control of the eastern region of the Congo, and it has been alleged that they have support from Rwandan government in being able to hold the area and also to be able to take the gold from that area. But while that is the popular news, based on what I've been following for quite a while in that area, I find it hard to believe the Giza company, and also I find it hard to believe the M23 rebel, because the M23 rebel claiming that they don't have the facility to do large-scale mining that will result in them taking something as substantial as 100 kg of gold, or that it is only artisanal miners that are doing the mining there. Well, what has come to light over time is that the M23 rebel capture these artisanal miners like slaves, and they are overworked and made to dig up this gold. And if you have enough a number of slaves working on that field, then it is possible for them to do even more than a reported 100 kg of gold bullion that they have been reported to do per month. But at the same time, because the government forces is constantly alleged to have been bombarding the area, so ability for them to be able to pull off that large-scale operation is also in doubt. And don't forget that these mines have been changing hands from time to time since the conflict began several years ago. And so it is not a new thing. And the Swangiza company claiming that they have lost about $5 million worth of equipment and about $70 million worth of gold in the course under review is hard to believe, and it is hard to say they are lying. And the reason for that is that because I know of some mining sites in my own country here, and we know how many of these companies who do register legitimately, how they do backhand operations, and many of them benefit from the instability in the area in order to mine even more than the license that they were given. So I believe that we should take whatever they are saying with a pinch of salt. The companies, I believe, are part of the people who are aggravating tensions and conflicts in the area. And the earlier the government find a middle ground to sit with the M23 rebels and discuss peace, the better it will be for the country and the people who are suffering as casualties at the moment.
Yes, Ayanuga, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. A pleasure to have you. We now move on over to some more updates and over to Sudan, where thousands of children in the country's Darfur region are facing an imminent risk of death as malnutrition soars in the besieged city of Al-Fashir. 4 United Nations agencies have issued a grave warning, saying more than 250,000 civilians, half of them children, have been cut off from food and medical aid for over 16 months. Health facilities have collapsed, leaving thousands of severely malnutritioned children without treatment. Al-Fashir remains the last army stronghold in Darfur amid ongoing battles with the Rapid Support Forces. The UN agencies, the IOM, the UNHCR, UNICEF and the World Food Programme say famine conditions persist across Sudan, with over 30 million people, including 15 million children, in desperate need of aid. So far, only a quarter of the $4.2 billion UN humanitarian appeal has been funded. We're now joined by Desmond Majekudumni. He's a political and environmental activist, and he joins us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Desmond, what more can you tell us about the war in Sudan? Of course, we've just heard some severely alarming figures there and the humanitarian implications of it.
Indeed, those figures are extremely alarming, extremely alarming. 15 million children in a very severe situation. Children. So the reality is, what can possibly justify doing that to these children? You know, what cause can possibly justify that? And I'm not pointing fingers at either side. I'm pointing my fist at both sides. How can they justify what they are doing that is affecting the children in this way? I mean, it's bad enough that at least 15 million adults are being negatively impacted, driven into starvation, driven into disease, driven into early, painful death. I mean, that's bad enough. But the children, were the children part of their quarrel, part of their argument that has driven them to this? It is horrendous, it is disgusting, it is totally unacceptable, and there's one thing that the perpetrators on both sides are probably not really cognizant of. The consequences of this horrendous action that they perpetrated on these children will be unavoidably upon them. These are the fundamental laws of the universe. Action begets reaction. They call it retribution in the Christian religion. They call it kifara in the Islamic religion. It is called karma in other religions. So they should be very, very wary of what they are doing and bring ameliorative measures immediately. Thank God for the United Nations, the UNICEF. They seem to be really, really trying. But the world needs to make an outcry. What are we doing as citizens of this tiny little planet, our only home, Earth? What are we doing? Are we making an outcry? Are hundreds of millions of us in all different parts of the world, different continents, appealing and making an outcry that this must stop? Hideous.
Yes, thank you very much, Desmond, for joining us here on the programme. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on once again, and internet access in Cameroon is significantly disrupted as protests continue over alleged irregularities in this month's presidential election. Internet monitor net blocks. Cameroon's Constitutional Council on Wednesday, October the 22nd, threw out all petitions contesting the October the 12th presidential election, clearing the way for full results to be announced. Paul Biya, the world's oldest ruler at 92, is widely expected to maintain his 43-year grip on power despite an energised opposition pushing for change. Some locals have reacted to the situation. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
Nous avons voté et nous savons que la majeure partie des Camerounais ont voté l'opposition, de M. Issa Chiroma. Mais aujourd'hui, on nous déclare le contraire. On nous fait état de fait que certains PV ont été falsifiés. Et même dans le bureau de vote où nous avons voté, nous recevons plutôt des messages contraires au rapport que nous avons eu au moment de dépouillage. Vraiment, c'est regrettable.
C'est pour ça que vous voyez les manifestations à travers tout le pays. Parce que nous qui avons voté, nous ne se reconnaissons pas dans les résultats qui sont annoncés. Nous savons que l'immense majorité des Camerounais ont voté pour un candidat que tout le monde connaît qui s'appelle Chiroma. Mais aujourd'hui, on nous donne les tendances, franchement, c'est autre chose. Donc on n'attend rien d'un coup constitutionnel, on n'attend rien de ce verdict. Et puis voilà, c'est la rue qui va grandir de toute façon. La rue.
Les unes ont parlé, nous devons avoir notre président Issa Chiroma qui doit prendre le pouvoir et redonner espoir à la jeunesse. Nous sommes partis, nous sommes presque partis. C'est les jeunes qui doivent venir remonter les familles. Mais s'il reste encore au pouvoir 7 ans, vous imaginez les parents continuer à s'occuper des enfants. Après les diplômes, il n'y a pas de travail. Il n'y a pas d'avenir. Tous sont en train de partir au Canada. Tous sont en train de prendre la mer pour aller en Europe. Alors, qui va construire le pays? Nous sommes partis. Hein? Qui va construire le pays?
Now we move on to our final story of the hour. Ghana's former First Lady, Nana Konadu-Agyemang Rawlings, has died at the age of 76. She was the widow of Ghana's longest-serving leader, Jerry John Rawlings, who died 5 years ago. She led 2 coups before twice being elected president in multi-party polls. Social media is awash with tributes to the former First Lady, politician and women's rights advocate, who Ghanaian presidential spokesperson Felix Kauai Ofoso said had died after a short illness on Thursday morning. Her family visited President John Mahama in the afternoon to officially notify him of her death. The president leads the National Democratic Congress party founded by Jerry Rawlings after he took power. And that's a wrap on the Africa Brief. Keep watching NewsX World for more updates from around the world.